I'm not your date. Those 4 words, delivered by a flour-dusted single father to a woman expecting someone else entirely, should have ended everything before it began. Instead, they started it. What happens when a man built from broken pieces, raising a daughter alone above a Seattle bakery, steps into his brother's shoes for one disastrous blind date? What happens when the woman across the table doesn't walk away, but leans closer? This is the story of Caleb Wright, a father who thought love was a luxury he couldn't afford, until it found him anyway. Stay with me until the end, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The rain hadn't stopped in 3 days. Caleb Wright stood at the counter of his bakery, watching water streak down the front window in crooked rivers, distorting the gray Seattle street beyond. The overhead lights hummed. The espresso machine hissed. His daughter's backpack sat slumped by the register, forgotten after the morning rush to school. He'd have to remember it tomorrow. He always did. 32 years old, and Caleb's life could be measured in lists. Flower orders, school pickup times, rent due dates, recipe adjustments. There was no room for error, no margin for spontaneity. When you were a single father running a business that barely broke even, every minute mattered. Romance, relationships, dating, those belonged to a version of himself that had dissolved years ago, somewhere between midnight feedings and learning to braid hair from YouTube tutorials. His phone buzzed against the countertop. Mom calling Caleb dried his hands on his apron, white canvas perpetually stained with butter and chocolate, and answered. "Hey, Ma." "Caleb, thank God." His mother's voice came through tight, strained. "I need you to do something for me, for your brother." He pinched the bridge of his nose. "What did Marcus do now?" "He's sick, really sick. Flu, fever, the whole thing. He can barely stand." "Okay, so tell him to rest. What's the emergency?" There was a pause. In that pause, Caleb heard everything he needed to know. His mother was about to ask him something ridiculous. "He has a blind date tonight," she said, "at 7, downtown." Caleb laughed, a short, disbelieving sound. "Ma, you're kidding." "I'm not kidding. Mrs. Park set it up, her daughter's friend. Marcus has been talking about it for 2 weeks. If he cancels now, it'll look terrible. Mrs. Park will think we're not serious people." "We're not serious people. Marcus flakes on things constantly." "Caleb." His mother's tone shifted, the way it always did when she was about to deploy guilt like a weapon. "This matters. Appearances matter. If Marcus doesn't show, it reflects on all of us. The family." Caleb stared at the ceiling. "So let it reflect. I'm not going on a blind date for my brother. That's insane." "You don't have to date her. Just show up, explain the situation, apologize on Marcus's behalf. You're good at that. Explaining, smoothing things over. You've always been the responsible one." The responsible one. The reliable one. The one who cleaned up messes. Caleb's jaw tightened. "I have a daughter to pick up. I have bread in the oven. I have... Your father can get Emma from school. I'll watch her tonight. Please, Caleb. Just 1 hour. Show your face, be polite, and leave. That's all I'm asking." He wanted to say no. Every fiber of his practical, routine-driven mind screamed no. But his mother's voice carried that edge of desperation that only mothers can wield, and Caleb had never been good at denying her. 1 hour, he said finally. "That's it." "Thank you, sweetheart. 7 o'clock. The cafe on Pine near the market. Her name is Nora Hayes. She'll be wearing..." "I don't need to know what she's wearing. I'm not actually dating her." "A blue coat. Just so you recognize her." Caleb hung up and set the phone down harder than necessary. The rain kept falling. The espresso machine kept hissing. He had 4 hours to finish the day's baking, clean the kitchen, prep tomorrow's dough, and somehow transform himself into someone presentable enough to deliver bad news to a stranger. He looked down at his flour-covered hands. "This is stupid," he muttered to the empty bakery. But he'd agreed. And Caleb Wright always kept his word. 7:03 p.m. The cafe on Pine. The cafe was one of those aggressively trendy spots that served $8 lattes in ceramic mugs shaped like irregular stones. Exposed brick, Edison bulbs, a chalkboard menu written in pristine cursive. Caleb felt wildly out of place the moment he stepped through the door. He'd changed into his only decent button-down, navy blue, slightly wrinkled, and jeans that didn't have flour ground into the knees. His hair, dark and perpetually unruly, had been tamed with water and hope. He still smelled faintly of yeast and sugar. There was probably dough under his fingernails. He scanned the room. There, corner table near the window. A woman in a blue coat, just like his mother said. She was looking down at her phone, one hand wrapped around a coffee cup. Dark hair pulled back. Profile clean and composed. Caleb's stomach nodded. Just explain. Be polite. Leave. He crossed the cafe, weaving between tables of couples and freelancers with laptops. The woman looked up as he approached, and for a split second, their eyes met. Hers were gray, calm, observant. Nora Hayes? Caleb asked. She nodded, a polite smile forming. You must be— Not who you're expecting, Caleb interrupted gently. He pulled out the chair across from her, but didn't sit. I'm Caleb, Marcus's brother. He's sick, flu, fever, and he asked me to come explain in person. He's really sorry. He wanted to be here. Nora's expression shifted, but not in the way Caleb expected. No irritation, no disappointment, just curiosity. You came all the way here to apologize for him? She asked. My mother insisted. Family honor, apparently. Caleb tried for a self-deprecating smile. I know it's weird. I'll get out of your hair. Sit, Nora said. Caleb blinked. What? Sit down. You came all this way. The least I can do is let you finish your coffee. I didn't order coffee. Then order one. She gestured to the empty chair. Come on, I don't bite. I don't. It's against every instinct telling him to leave. Caleb sat. Nora leaned back, studying him with an expression that wasn't quite amusement, but close. So, you're the brother. Unfortunately. Marcus talked about you, said you run a bakery. Small bakery, very small, barely qualifies as a business. Don't do that, Nora said. Caleb frowned. Do what? Shrink yourself. You own a business. That's impressive. Caleb didn't know what to say to that. He wasn't used to people calling anything about his life impressive. Functional, maybe. Surviving. But not impressive. A waitress appeared and Caleb ordered an Americano out of obligation. When she left, an awkward silence settled over the table. Nora broke it first. How old's your daughter? Caleb's head snapped up. How did you— You have a Hello Kitty hair tie on your wrist. She nodded toward his left hand, and there's what looks like crayon on your sleeve. Caleb glanced down. Blue crayon, smudged into the fabric. Emma had been drawing at the counter that morning while he prepped croissants. She's 7, he said quietly. Her name's Emma. Just the two of you? Yeah. Caleb's voice was careful, neutral. This was usually where people got uncomfortable. Single dad, no mention of a mother. The math wasn't hard, but Nora just nodded. That must be hard. It's life. Still hard. Something in her tone, no pity, no judgment, just acknowledgement, made Caleb's shoulders relax a fraction. Some days, he admitted, but she's worth it. Every early morning, every missed opportunity, every— He stopped himself. Sorry, you didn't sign up for my life story. I signed up for a blind date with a stranger. Your life story is probably more interesting than whatever Marcus would have talked about. Caleb laughed, surprised. You don't even know him? I know his type. Charming, smooth. Probably would have spent the whole date talking about his car or his job. He drives a Civic and works in marketing. Nora grinned. See? I'm psychic. The waitress returned with Caleb's coffee. He wrapped his hands around the cup, letting the warmth seep into his palms. The cafe hummed around them. Low conversations, the hiss of the espresso machine, rain drumming against the windows. Can I ask you something? Nora said. Sure. Why'd you really come tonight? You could have just texted me or had Marcus text me, but you showed up in person. Caleb considered this. The honest answer felt too revealing, but he gave it anyway. Because I don't like letting people down, even strangers. My mom raised me to show up when you say you're going to show up. And if you can't, you owe people an explanation face to face. Nora was quiet for a moment, something shifting in her expression. That's rare, she said. What is? Integrity. Follow through. Most people would have canceled by text and called it good. Most people are smarter than me. I don't think that's true. Their eyes met again, and this time the moment stretched longer. Caleb felt something unfamiliar stir in his chest. Not attraction exactly, though she was undeniably beautiful. Something deeper. Recognition, maybe. The sense that the person across from him saw him clearly, without filters or assumptions. He looked away first, suddenly self-conscious. So, Nora said, her tone lighter. Tell me about this bakery of yours. You don't want to hear about that. I asked, didn't I? So Caleb told her. Not the polished version he'd give to a loan officer or a potential investor, the real version. He told her about buying the space 5 years ago with money he'd saved from working double shifts at someone else's restaurant. About the long nights learning recipes by trial and error, burning batch after batch until he got it right. About Emma sleeping in a playpen in the back office when she was a baby because he couldn't afford childcare. About the regulars who kept him afloat, the retired teacher who bought a baguette every morning, the construction crew that ordered donuts by the dozen on Fridays. He told her about the smell of bread baking at 4 a.m., the way the dough felt under his hands, the satisfaction of pulling a perfect loaf from the oven. He told her about teaching Emma to crack eggs, her small hands serious and focused. About reading to her between batches, her voice stumbling over words while he rolled out croissant dough. He told her things he hadn't told anyone in years, and Nora listened, really listened. Not the polite, half-focused listening people do while waiting for their turn to talk. She asked questions. She leaned forward. She smiled at the right moments and frowned at the hard parts. When Caleb mentioned his daughter's mother, briefly, carefully, Nora didn't press. She just nodded, understanding the shape of the absence without needing details. You're good at this, Caleb said eventually. At what? Listening. Most people just wait for you to stop talking. Most people are bad at conversations, Nora said. I like listening. You learn more that way. What about you? Caleb asked. What do you do? Nora's expression shifted slightly, not closed, but guarded. I work in tech, product management. It's fine. Pays well. Lots of meetings. You don't sound excited about it. I'm not, but it's stable, logical, makes sense on paper. She swirled her coffee. Sometimes I think I chose it because it was the smart thing to do, not because I actually wanted it. You could change. Could I? Nora's smile was wry. I'm 31. I have a career, a reputation, a 401k. People don't just walk away from that. People do it all the time. Do they? Or do they just talk about it while staying exactly where they are? Caleb didn't have an answer for that. He understood the weight of practicality, the way responsibilities could calcify into a cage that felt like safety. They talked for another hour, then another. The cafe began to empty around them. The barista started wiping down tables with increasing vigor, a not-so-subtle hint. Caleb checked his phone and was startled to see it was nearly 9:30. I should go, he said, standing reluctantly. I have to be up at 4. For the bakery? Bread waits for no one. Nora stood too, pulling her blue coat around her shoulders. They walked out together into the rain-slicked street. The city glittered around them, neon reflecting in puddles, the sound of traffic muffled by weather. Thank you, Nora said, for coming tonight, for being honest. Thank you for not being mad at Marcus. Oh, I'm a little mad at Marcus, Nora said, smiling. But I'm glad you showed up instead. There was a pause, the kind that happens when two people don't want to say goodbye but don't know how to extend the moment. Your bakery, Nora said suddenly. What's it called? Wrights. Original, I know. Where is it? Caleb told her the address, expecting nothing. People ask these questions out of politeness, not genuine interest. Maybe I'll stop by sometime, Nora said. You don't have to. I want to. I'm curious to see if your croissants are as good as you claim. I never claimed they were good. You didn't have to. I could hear it in the way you talked about them. Caleb felt heat rise in his face, embarrassed and pleased in equal measure. They said goodbye. Nora headed toward the bus stop. Caleb walked to his truck, parked 3 blocks away. The rain had slowed to a drizzle. His shirt was damp by the time he reached the vehicle. He sat in the driver's seat for a long moment, hands on the wheel, not starting the engine. Something had happened tonight. He didn't know what to call it. A connection, a crack in his carefully maintained routine. A moment that felt significant in a way he couldn't quite articulate. He thought about Nora's gray eyes, the way she'd leaned forward when he talked, the absence of pity when he mentioned Emma. Then he shook his head, started the truck, and drove home through the rain. It was one conversation, one evening, nothing more. By tomorrow, it would fade into the background noise of his life. Just another task completed, another obligation met. He believed that. He was wrong. 3 days later. The bell above the bakery door chimed at 2:47 p.m. during the afternoon lull between lunch rush and school pickup. Caleb was in the back, elbow deep in sourdough starter, when he heard his part-time employee, Jamie, call out. "Boss? Someone's asking for you." Caleb wiped his hands on a towel and pushed through the swinging door to the front. Nora Hayes stood at the counter, blue coat traded for a gray sweater, a canvas bag over her shoulder. She looked different in daylight, softer somehow, less composed. Her hair was down. "Hi," she said. Caleb froze. "Hi." Jamie looked between them with barely concealed curiosity. "I was in the neighborhood," Nora continued, though they both knew that was probably a lie. The bakery wasn't in any neighborhood where someone in tech product management would just happen to be passing through. "Thought I'd take you up on those croissants." Caleb's brain scrambled to catch up. "Right, yeah, of course." He moved behind the counter, suddenly hyper-aware of the flour on his apron, the mess of his hair, the heat of the ovens bleeding into the small space. Jamie retreated to the back with a knowing smirk. "What would you like?" Caleb asked. "What do you recommend?" "The almond croissant's good, so's the plain butter. We have chocolate, but those are better in the morning when they're fresh." "I'll take an almond, and whatever you're proud of today." Caleb selected an almond croissant and one of the morning cinnamon rolls. Emma's favorite, though he'd never admit that's why he made them. He placed them in a small paper bag. "On the house," he said when Nora reached for her wallet. "Caleb, you drove all the way here. Least I can do." Nora accepted the bag with a smile that made something in Caleb's chest tighten. "Can I sit?" She gestured to one of the small tables by the window. "Sure. Yeah." She sat. And then, because Caleb's life had turned inexplicably strange in the past 72 hours, she opened her laptop and stayed. For 2 hours, Nora worked at that table, occasionally taking bites of pastry, sipping the coffee Caleb brought her without being asked. She didn't demand conversation, didn't interrupt, just existed in his space, comfortable and unhurried. Other customers came and went. The afternoon shifted toward evening. Caleb prepped tomorrow's dough, refilled the display case, took inventory. Through it all, he was aware of her presence the way you're aware of warmth from a fire. Constant, pleasant, grounding. At 4:15, he locked the front door and flipped the sign to closed. Nora looked up from her laptop. "Time to get Emma?" "You remembered her name." "Of course I did." Caleb untied his apron, suddenly nervous. "Do you want to come?" The words escaped before he could think them through. Nora's eyebrows lifted slightly. "To pick up your daughter from school? Forget it. That's weird. You probably have work." "I'd love to," Nora said. Greenwood Elementary, 4:42. Emma Wright burst through the school doors like a small, energetic hurricane, backpack bouncing, jacket half off, ponytail askew. She spotted Caleb and launched herself at him with the full-body enthusiasm only 7-year-olds could muster. "Dad! Dad! Guess what happened in art class today?" Caleb caught her, steadying her before she could ricochet off a nearby parent. "Tell me in the car, Firefly. We've got company." Emma noticed Nora for the first time, her enthusiasm dimming into shy curiosity. She pressed closer to Caleb's side. "Emma, this is my friend Nora. Nora, this is Emma." "Hi, Emma," Nora said, crouching slightly to be at eye level. Her voice was gentle, unforced. "Your dad's told me a lot about you." Emma peeked up at Caleb. "He has?" "Mm-hmm. He said you're really good at drawing." That was all it took. Emma's shyness evaporated like morning fog. I am. Do you want to see? I have my sketchbook in my backpack. Today we did self-portraits, and mine has a dragon in it because I wanted to make it more interesting. Mrs. Peterson said it was creative, but I should probably draw just me next time, but I think that's boring, don't you? Nora laughed, a real surprised laugh. I think dragons make everything better. Exactly. They walked to Caleb's truck, Emma chattering the entire way, Nora listening with the same focused attention she'd given Caleb at the cafe. In the truck, Emma claimed the middle seat and proceeded to show Nora every single drawing in her sketchbook, providing detailed commentary on each one. Caleb drove, listening to his daughter's voice mix with Nora's responses, and felt something dangerous bloom in his chest. Hope. Set. Wright's Bakery, 5:30 p.m. They ended up back at the bakery. It hadn't been planned, but Emma was hungry, and Nora seemed in no hurry to leave, and Caleb found himself unlocking the door and ushering them inside. The apartment above the bakery was small, a kitchen that opened into a living room, 2 bedrooms barely bigger than closets, a bathroom with perpetually dripping faucet Caleb kept meaning to fix. It smelled like bread and coffee and the lavender detergent he used on Emma's sheets. Emma immediately dragged Nora to the kitchen table to show her more drawings, while Caleb assembled dinner from leftovers: rotisserie chicken, roasted vegetables, rice. Nothing fancy. He plated it quickly, self-conscious about the chipped dishes, the mismatched silverware. But when he set the food down, Nora smiled at him with something that looked like gratitude. They ate together. Emma dominated the conversation, asking Nora questions with the blunt curiosity of childhood. Where do you live? Do you have pets? What's your favorite color? Have you ever seen a whale? Nora answered each one seriously, never condescending, never dismissive. Caleb watched them, his daughter and this woman who'd appeared in his life by accident, and felt the careful walls he'd built around his heart begin to crack. After dinner, Emma insisted on showing Nora her room. Caleb cleaned up, listening to their voices drift through the thin walls, Emma explaining her stuffed animal collection, Nora asking thoughtful questions about each one. When they emerged, Emma was yawning. "Bedtime, Firefly," Caleb said. "But Nora's here." "Nora will still exist tomorrow." Emma considered this logic, found it acceptable, and hugged Nora goodnight with surprising fierceness. "Will you come back?" "If your dad says it's okay." Emma looked at Caleb with pleading eyes. "We'll see," Caleb said, which in parent speak meant probably yes. He tucked Emma into bed, read her 2 chapters of the book they were working through, something about a girl and a dragon, naturally, and returned to the living room to find Nora standing by the window, looking out at the street below. "She's amazing," Nora said without turning around. "She is. You're doing a good job. Raising her." Caleb's throat tightened. "Most days I feel like I'm barely holding it together." "That's parenting. Nobody knows what they're doing. You just love them and hope it's enough." "You sound like you know from experience." Nora turned, her expression complicated. "My parents divorced when I was young. My mom raised me and my sister alone. I remember her saying that exact thing, that she was just loving us and hoping it was enough. It was. It is." They stood there in the dim living room, the city lights filtering through the window, the distant sound of rain starting again. "Thank you," Caleb said. "For today. For being kind to her." "I wasn't being kind. I like her. She's genuine, funny, smart. She gets that from her mother." It was the first time Caleb had mentioned Emma's mother aloud to Nora. The words hung in the air, heavy with things unsaid. Nora didn't push. She just nodded, understanding the border he'd drawn. "I should go," she said, though neither of them moved. "Yeah. Can I come back? To the bakery, I mean. Maybe work from here sometimes? It's quieter than my office, and the coffee's better." Caleb's heart hammered against his ribs. "You're always welcome." Nora smiled, soft, genuine, devastating. "Good." She gathered her things. Caleb walked her downstairs through the dark bakery that smelled like tomorrow's bread already rising. At the door they paused. "Caleb," Nora said. "Yeah?" "I'm glad Marcus got sick." Before he could respond, she was gone, disappearing into the rainy Seattle night. Caleb stood in the doorway long after she'd left, rain misting against his face, the impossible thought taking root in his mind. Maybe. Maybe. He locked the door, climbed the stairs to his small apartment, checked on his sleeping daughter one more time, and for the first time in years, Caleb Wright went to bed thinking about someone other than Emma. Someone who'd walked into his carefully constructed life and made it feel suddenly like it could be more. Nora came back the next Tuesday, then Thursday, then the following Monday. At first, she'd arrive in the afternoon with her laptop, order a coffee, and settle into the corner table by the window. She'd work quietly for a few hours, occasionally glancing up when the bell chimed, smiling at Caleb when their eyes met across the bakery. She never overstayed, never imposed. Just existed in his space like she belonged there. By the third week, she knew the regulars by name. Mrs. Chen, the retired teacher who bought a baguette every morning at 7:15 sharp. The construction crew, Marco, Devin, and Luis, who descended on Fridays like locusts, clearing out the donut case. The college student Priya, who studied in the corner and survived on black coffee and determination. "You're good with people," Caleb observed one afternoon, watching Nora chat with Mrs. Chen about her grandson's college acceptance. Nora shrugged, closing her laptop. "I like people. Most of them, anyway." Most? Corporate people can be exhausting. Everyone's performing all the time, networking, positioning, saying what they think you want to hear instead of what they actually think. She stirred her coffee absently. "It's refreshing to be somewhere real." Caleb wiped down the counter, considering this. "And a bakery in a mediocre neighborhood is real?" "This bakery is real. You're real. The way you remember Mrs. Chen likes her baguette sliced, but not bagged. The way you give Priya free refills when she's been here for 6 hours. The way you never rush people even when there's a line. That's real." Heat crept up Caleb's neck. He wasn't used to being seen so clearly, having his small gestures noticed and named. "It's just good business," he muttered. "It's kindness," Nora corrected. "There's a difference." Before Caleb could respond, the bell chimed. Emma bounded through the door, still in her school uniform, backpack bouncing. "Nora!" "What?" She launched herself at the table with the enthusiasm of someone who'd found their favorite person. "You're here!" "I'm here," Nora confirmed, smiling. "How was school?" "We learned about fractions and I hate them. They don't make sense. Why can't things just be whole numbers?" "Because life would be boring if everything was simple." Emma considered this, found it acceptable, and dumped her backpack on the floor. "Can you help me with my homework? Dad's terrible at math." "I'm not terrible," Caleb protested. "I run a business. I do math constantly." "You count money. That's different from fractions." Nora laughed, pulling out the chair beside her. "Come on, let's see what we're working with." And just like that, it became routine. Emma would finish school, come straight to the bakery, and claim the table next to Nora. They'd work through homework together, Nora patient and creative in her explanations, Emma gradually less resistant. Sometimes they'd abandon schoolwork entirely and just draw, Emma sketching her fantastical creatures while Nora doodled in the margins of her work notes. Caleb would watch them between customers, something warm and terrifying expanding in his chest. This was dangerous. This feeling of rightness, of completion. He'd built his life to be self-sufficient, to need nothing and no one beyond Emma. Letting someone in meant vulnerability, meant risk, meant the possibility of loss. But Emma was blooming under Nora's attention, becoming more confident, more open, and Caleb couldn't bring himself to pull away. One evening, after the bakery closed and Emma was upstairs doing her reading, Nora helped Caleb clean up. It wasn't something he'd asked for. She'd just started wiping down tables, stacking chairs, moving through the space with easy familiarity. "You don't have to do this," Caleb said, mopping the floor. "I know." Nora sprayed cleaner on the display case, wiping away fingerprints. "But you're always doing everything alone. Doesn't that get exhausting?" "It's what I'm used to." "That doesn't mean it's good." Caleb paused, mop in hand. "What are we doing here, Nora?" She stopped wiping, turning to face him. "What do you mean?" "This. You coming here almost every day, helping with Emma, cleaning my bakery. What is this?" Nora was quiet for a long moment, her expression careful. "I don't know." Does it have to be something specific? Most things are something specific. Maybe I just like being here. Maybe I like the way this place feels. Maybe I like you and Emma and the fact that when I'm here I don't have to pretend to be anyone other than who I am. The honesty of it landed like a punch. Caleb set the mop aside. I like having you here, he admitted. Emma loves you, but I need you to understand something. My life is complicated. I don't have time for casual. I don't have energy for something that's going to fall apart in 3 months when you realize how boring and small my world is. You think your world is boring? I know it is. I wake up at 4. I make bread. I take care of my daughter. I go to bed exhausted. That's it. That's my whole life. No spontaneity, no adventure, no... Caleb? Nora crossed the space between them, close enough that he could smell her perfume, something clean and subtle. Your life isn't boring, it's intentional. There's a difference. You work in tech. You probably make 6 figures. You could be dating someone with a real career, someone who can take you to nice restaurants, and I don't want nice restaurants. I want this. She gestured around the bakery. I want conversations that matter. I want to help a 7-year-old understand fractions. I want to drink good coffee and watch you work and feel like I'm part of something real instead of just performing success. Caleb's throat tightened. You don't know what you're saying. Yes, I do. They stood there in the dim bakery, the city quiet outside, the weight of unspoken things hanging between them. I'm scared, Caleb said quietly. Of this. Of you. Of what happens if Emma gets attached and you leave. I'm scared too, Nora admitted. I'm scared of wanting this too much. Of disrupting your life, of not being enough for what you and Emma need. You're already enough. The words escaped before Caleb could stop them, raw and true. Nora's eyes widened slightly, something shifting in her expression. Then let's just be scared together, she said, and see what happens. Caleb wanted to argue, to list all the logical reasons this was a bad idea. But logic had never accounted for the way Nora looked at his daughter, the way she fit into his chaotic life without demanding he change it, the way she made him feel seen. So instead, he nodded, and Nora smiled, and something between them shifted from possibility into something more solid, more real. A week later, Nora showed up on Saturday morning, the bakery's busiest day. Caleb was drowning in orders, Jamie calling in sick, the line stretching out the door. He was simultaneously running the register, pulling bread from the oven, and trying to restock the display case when Nora appeared behind the counter. What are you doing? Caleb asked, flustered. Helping. She tied one of the spare aprons around her waist. Point me where you need me. Nora, you don't work here. Register or restocking? Pick one before that woman in line has an aneurysm. Caleb assigned her to restocking. Within an hour, Nora had learned the system, where everything went, how to arrange the displays, when to pull items from the back. She moved efficiently, asking questions when needed, but mostly intuiting the flow. She chatted with customers, remembered orders, made people laugh. During a brief lull around 11, Caleb found her in the back, eating a slightly burnt croissant he'd been planning to throw away. You're eating my mistakes, he observed. It's still good, just toasted a little extra. She grinned. You're a perfectionist. Probably throw away anything that's not flawless. I have standards. You have impossible standards. This croissant is delicious. Caleb leaned against the counter, studying her. Flour dusted her sweater. Her hair was falling out of its ponytail. She looked happy. Thank you, he said, for helping today. It's fun. I haven't done service work since college. Forgot how satisfying it is to just make people happy with food. You're good at it. I'm good at reading people. It's the same skill set as product management, just more honest. The afternoon rush hit. Nora stayed through all of it, learning the register, taking orders, charming the construction crew when they arrived. Marco tried to flirt with her, mildly, respectfully, and Nora deflected with such skill that he ended up laughing and giving Caleb a knowing look. You better lock that down, boss, Devin muttered, before someone else does. Caleb felt a spike of something possessive and unfamiliar. By closing time, Nora was exhausted but energized. They cleaned together in comfortable silence, the rhythm now familiar. When everything was done, Caleb locked the door and turned to find her watching him. What? He asked. I like this. Being useful, being part of something. You're always part of something. You have a whole career. A career isn't the same as mattering. Caleb understood that distinction more than he could articulate. Upstairs, Emma was delighted to find Nora staying for dinner. A simple pasta that Caleb threw together. Nothing fancy, but warm and filling. Emma chattered about her day, a story involving a playground dispute and strategic alliances that sounded like tiny political warfare. Nora listened with genuine interest, asking follow-up questions that made Emma feel important. After dinner, they ended up on the couch together, some animated movie playing on the TV. Emma sat between them, gradually migrating until her head rested against Nora's shoulder. Nora's hand came up naturally, stroking Emma's hair with unconscious gentleness. Caleb watched them, his daughter and this woman who'd appeared like an answer to a question he'd been too afraid to ask, and felt his carefully maintained defenses crumble completely. When Emma fell asleep mid-movie, Nora helped carry her to bed. They stood in the doorway of Emma's small room, watching her chest rise and fall, the nightlight casting soft shadows. "She's lucky to have you," Nora whispered. "I'm lucky to have her." They retreated to the living room. The movie still played, forgotten. Rain had started again, soft against the windows. Nora should have left. It was late, nearly 10, but neither of them moved toward the door. "Can I ask you something?" Caleb said. "Always." "Why me? Seriously, you could have anyone. Why a single dad running a struggling bakery?" Nora was quiet, considering the question with the seriousness it deserved. "Because you're real," she said finally. "Because when I'm with you, I don't have to be the successful tech woman or the daughter who made good or the person everyone expects me to be. I can just be Nora, messy, uncertain, tired of performing Nora, and you don't ask me to be anything other than that." "I like messy Nora." "Good. Because she's the only version I have left." They moved closer on the couch, the space between them shrinking. Caleb could count her freckles in the dim light, see the exhaustion around her eyes that makeup usually hid. "I'm going to kiss you," he said, giving her time to pull away. "Okay," Nora breathed. He did, soft and careful, a question more than a statement. She answered by leaning in, her hand coming up to cup his face, the kiss deepening into something that felt like promise. When they broke apart, Nora's eyes were bright. "I should go," she said, not moving. "You should," Caleb agreed, not releasing her. She left 20 minutes later, both of them flushed and slightly stunned. Caleb watched from the window as she walked to her car, turning once to wave. He waved back, feeling like a teenager, feeling ridiculous and happy and terrified. The next morning he woke to a text. "Good morning. I can't stop thinking about last night." He smiled at his phone like an idiot. "Me neither. Can I see you today?" "You know where to find me." She showed up at 2 with sandwiches from the deli down the street, and they ate lunch in the back room while Jamie handled the counter. They talked about nothing important, movies they'd seen, books they'd read, the weird phenomenon of Seattle having 17 different words for rain. "Come to dinner Friday," Nora said suddenly. "My place. I want to cook for you." "What about Emma?" "Bring her, obviously." Caleb hesitated. Meeting at the bakery was safe, neutral territory. Going to her place felt like crossing a line, making this more official. Nora saw the hesitation. "Too much too fast?" "No, maybe. I don't know. I'm not good at this." "Neither am I." "You seem pretty good at it." "I'm winging it completely. I haven't dated anyone seriously in 3 years. My last relationship ended because he wanted me to be less focused on work, but also successful enough to impress his friends. It was exhausting." "That's a terrible reason to end a relationship." It was a terrible relationship. Nora took his hand, her fingers warm. "This doesn't feel terrible. Scary, but not terrible." "Scary I can do," Caleb said. So Friday night, he and Emma showed up at Nora's apartment downtown, a modern space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. It was beautiful and impersonal, like a hotel room someone was temporarily occupying. Emma was immediately fascinated by the view. Nora showed her the lights, naming neighborhoods, while Caleb absorbed the space. Expensive furniture, art on the walls that probably cost more than his monthly mortgage, a kitchen that looked barely used. "I know," Nora said, appearing beside him. "It's sterile. I'm never here long enough to make it feel like home." It's nice. It's lonely. Dinner was pasta, simple, slightly overcooked, served with garlic bread that was more garlic than bread. Nora admitted she wasn't much of a cook, and Emma found this hilarious. Dad's an amazing cook, Emma announced. He makes everything from scratch. I work in a bakery. It's kind of required. Still impressive, Nora said. I can barely manage boxed macaroni. After dinner, Emma explored the apartment while Caleb helped clean up. They worked side by side in the pristine kitchen, and Caleb felt the strangeness of being in her space, seeing this other part of her life. Do you like living here? He asked. Nora looked around as if seeing the apartment for the first time. Honestly, no. It's convenient for work, close to the office. But it doesn't feel like mine. It feels like a place I'm borrowing. Where would you want to live? Somewhere with character. Somewhere that feels lived in. Somewhere with neighbors who actually know your name. She dried a plate, thoughtful. Somewhere like your neighborhood, actually. Caleb's heart stuttered. They put Emma to bed on Nora's couch around 9, the girl exhausted from exploring. Then Caleb and Nora sat by the windows, the city sprawling beneath them, talking in low voices. My brother called yesterday, Caleb said. Marcus. He wanted to know how the blind date went. What did you tell him? That he should get sick more often. Nora laughed. Did you tell him about us? There's an us? Isn't there? Caleb looked at her, really looked. At the hope in her eyes, the vulnerability she was letting him see. Yeah, he said quietly. There's an us. Good. They kissed again, slower this time, more certain. When they broke apart, Nora rested her forehead against his. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. The work-life balance thing, I'm terrible at it. I get consumed by projects and disappear for weeks. I work 60-hour weeks and have a 7-year-old. I'm not exactly available. So we're both disasters. Apparently. But we're disasters together? Yeah, Caleb said. Together. The weeks that followed developed their own rhythm. Nora would work from the bakery 3 or 4 days a week. Some evenings she'd stay for dinner. Weekends she'd help during the rush, refusing payment, but accepting payment in pastries and coffee. Emma started referring to her as my friend Nora, with such pride that Caleb's heart ached. They went on actual dates, fumbling, awkward attempts at normalcy. A movie where Emma fell asleep 20 minutes in. Dinner at a restaurant where they spent more time talking than eating. A walk around Green Lake where Emma fed ducks and Nora held Caleb's hand like it was the most natural thing in the world. But mostly, they existed in the small spaces of daily life. Homework at the bakery counter, cooking dinner together in Caleb's cramped kitchen, reading to Emma before bed, taking turns with chapters. It felt easy, comfortable, right, which is why Caleb should have known it couldn't last. The first crack appeared on a Wednesday evening. Nora had stayed for dinner, and afterward, while Emma watched a show, they sat at the kitchen table going over the bakery's finances. Caleb had mentioned needing to upgrade equipment, the industrial mixer was dying, and Nora had offered to look at the numbers. You're barely breaking even, she said, frowning at the spreadsheet on her laptop. I know. Caleb, this is serious. You can't sustain this. I've been sustaining it for 5 years. Barely, one major expense and you're underwater. She pointed at the screen. You need to raise prices, cut costs, or find additional revenue streams. I can't raise prices. My customers are working-class people. They come here because it's affordable. Then you need to attract different customers. Market to the downtown crowd, tourists, corporate catering. Caleb felt something prickle in his chest. That's not what this place is. It could be. You're talented enough. The quality is there. You just need better branding, maybe a website, social media presence. I don't want to be a trendy destination spot. I want to be a neighborhood bakery. And what happens when the neighborhood bakery can't afford rent? When the mixer dies and you can't replace it? Her voice was reasonable, logical, everything Caleb usually valued. But right now it felt like criticism. I'll figure it out, he said tightly. I always do. You don't have to figure it out alone. That's what I'm trying to say. Let me help. I don't need help. The words came out harsher than intended. Nora pulled back slightly, hurt flashing across her face. I'm not trying to take over. I'm just trying to fix me? To fix my failing business? Caleb, that's not. I appreciate the concern, but I've been doing this by myself for 5 years. I think I know what I'm doing. Silence settled between them, tense and uncomfortable. From the living room, the sound of Emma's show played on, oblivious. You're right, Nora said finally, closing her laptop. I'm sorry, I overstepped. Nora? No, you're right. It's your business, your decision. She stood, gathering her things. I should go. Don't leave like this. I'm not leaving angry. I'm leaving before I say something I'll regret. She managed a small smile. I'll see you tomorrow? Caleb nodded, throat tight. After she left, he sat at the kitchen table staring at his own spreadsheet of numbers that never quite added up. She was right. He knew she was right. But admitting he needed help felt like admitting failure, like confirming every doubt he'd ever had about his ability to provide the life Emma deserved. Emma appeared in the doorway, clutching her stuffed dragon. Did you and Nora have a fight? No, Firefly, just a disagreement. She looked sad when she left. I know. Are you going to fix it? Caleb pulled his daughter onto his lap, breathing in the strawberry scent of her shampoo. Yeah, I'll fix it. Good. I like Nora. I don't want her to go away. Me neither, baby. Me neither. But as Emma went back to her show and Caleb returned to his impossible numbers, a small voice whispered in the back of his mind, what if wanting her to stay wasn't enough? What if the reality of his life, the financial stress, the limited time, the constant juggling, eventually drove her away? What if he wasn't enough? He pushed the thought aside, but it lingered, sharp and insistent, the first seed of doubt taking root. The next morning, Caleb texted Nora before dawn, fingers clumsy on the phone screen while he waited for the oven to preheat. I'm sorry about last night. Can we talk? Her response came 20 minutes later. Of course. I'm sorry too. I'll come by this afternoon. But she didn't come that afternoon, or the next day. A work emergency, she explained via text. A product launch going sideways, late meetings, crisis management. Caleb understood. He told himself he understood. But the absence felt deliberate, like she was creating distance to match the space he'd demanded. By Friday, Emma was asking questions. Is Nora mad at us? No, Firefly, she's just busy with work. She's always busy with work now. Caleb had no response to that. The truth settled uncomfortably in his chest. This was what he'd been afraid of, the inevitable pull of her real life, the important life with meetings and deadlines and responsibilities that mattered in ways a neighborhood bakery never would. When Nora finally appeared the following Tuesday, she looked exhausted. Shadows under her eyes, hair pulled back in a messy bun, shoulders tight with tension. Hey, she said, sliding into her usual table like nothing had changed. Hey, yourself. Caleb brought her coffee without asking, the way he always did. Rough week? You have no idea. She wrapped her hands around the cup, absorbing its warmth. Product launch was a disaster. Spent 4 days putting out fires. My boss is furious. I'm pretty sure I'm on thin ice. I'm sorry. Not your fault. She looked up at him, something vulnerable in her expression. I missed this place. Missed you. We missed you too. They looked at each other across the counter, the apology from last week still hanging between them, unresolved. About the other night, Nora started. I was defensive, Caleb interrupted. You were trying to help, and I took it as criticism. I'm sorry. I was pushy, trying to fix something you didn't ask me to fix. She smiled weakly. Occupational hazard. I see a problem and immediately start strategizing solutions. The bakery is a problem. It's not a problem. It's a challenge. There's a difference. Feels like the same thing most days. Nora was quiet for a moment, watching the afternoon light filter through the window. Can I be honest about something? Always. That night scared me. Not because we fought, couples fight, but because I saw how easily you shut down, how quickly you pulled away. And it made me wonder if there's room in your life for someone else, or if you've built these walls so high that no one can actually get in. The words landed like stones in still water, rippling outward. Caleb felt his defenses rise automatically, the instinct to protect himself overwhelming. That's not fair, he said quietly. Maybe not, but it's what I'm afraid of." Before Caleb could respond, the bell chimed. A couple entered, tourists by the look of their cameras and waterproof jackets. He served them with mechanical politeness, his mind churning. When they left, Nora was still there, waiting. "I don't know how to do this," Caleb admitted, coming around the counter to sit across from her. "Let people in, I mean. For 5 years it's been me and Emma, self-sufficient. No one to disappoint, no one to let us down. And then you showed up and made me want things I'd convinced myself I didn't need." "Like what?" "Partnership, support, someone to share the weight with." He ran his hand through his hair, frustrated with his inability to articulate what he felt. "But wanting those things means risking them, means trusting someone won't leave when things get hard or boring or too real." "You think I'm going to leave?" "I think your life is important and impressive and my life is small. I think eventually you'll realize you can do better than a broke baker with a 7-year-old and more problems than solutions." Nora reached across the table, taking his hand. "Caleb, look at me." He did. "I don't want better. I want real. I want someone who shows up, who keeps his promises, who loves his daughter more than anything in the world. That's not small. That's everything. But your job is just a job. It pays well and looks good on paper, but it's not my whole identity. And honestly," she laughed, the sound slightly bitter, "I'm not even sure I want it anymore. This past week, working 18-hour days, missing time with you and Emma, it felt hollow, like I was chasing something that stopped mattering years ago." Caleb squeezed her hand. "Don't make life decisions based on what you think I need." "I'm not. I'm making them based on what I need. And what I need is to feel like my life has meaning beyond optimizing user engagement and hitting quarterly targets." They sat like that, hands linked across the table, the afternoon shifting toward evening around them. The bakery was quiet. Outside, rain began again, soft and persistent. "I'm still scared," Caleb said. "Me too. But I don't want you to go." "Good, because I'm not planning on it." Emma's arrival broke the moment. The 7-year-old bursting through the door with her usual energy. She saw Nora and lit up like a sparkler. "Nora, you're back! I thought you forgot about us." "Never," Nora said, pulling Emma into a hug. "I could never forget about you." That night, they fell back into their routine. Homework at the counter, dinner upstairs, Emma chattering about school, while Nora and Caleb exchanged glances that said everything words couldn't. The tension from the past week dissolved, but something had shifted. The easy comfort had developed an edge of awareness, the knowledge that what they were building was fragile and precious and could be destroyed by fear or pride or simple bad timing. Over the next few weeks, life returned to its rhythm, but with subtle changes. Nora started working from the bakery almost full-time, taking calls in the back room, joining virtual meetings with her laptop propped on bags of flour. Her coworkers asked questions. Caleb could hear fragments through the door, Nora's patient explanations about finding a quiet workspace, needing a change of environment. "They think I'm having a breakdown," she told Caleb one afternoon, laughing. "My manager asked if I needed to talk to HR." "Do you?" "Probably, but not for the reasons she thinks." The comments from Nora's professional world grew more pointed. A colleague stopped by the bakery once, a polished woman in expensive athleisure who looked around with barely concealed confusion. "This is where you've been working?" she asked Nora. "I thought you meant a co-working space." "This is better than a co-working space," Nora replied evenly. The woman's gaze landed on Caleb, assessing and dismissive in the same glance. "Well, it's certainly quaint." After she left, Nora was quiet. "I'm sorry about that," she said finally. "For what? Her being condescending?" "For the assumption that this place, that you, aren't enough." "She's not entirely wrong. This is pretty different from your usual world." "My usual world is exhausting and fake. This is real." But Caleb saw the doubt creeping in, the way Nora checked her phone more frequently, the tension in her shoulders when her boss called. The two parts of her life were colliding, and the friction was starting to show. The pressure intensified when Marcus showed up unannounced on a Saturday morning. Caleb was in the middle of the rush, customers lined up, ovens running hot, when his brother walked through the door looking like he'd stepped out of a cologne advertisement. "Little brother," Marcus announced, spreading his arms. Heard you stole my date. Caleb shot him a warning look. Not now, Marcus. Come on, I'm kidding. Where is she? This mystery woman who picked you over me? Nora emerged from the back room, phone to her ear, finishing a work call. She looked up, saw Marcus, and something shifted in her expression. Caleb couldn't read it. Surprise, maybe, or assessment. Marcus, of course, turned on the charm immediately. You must be Nora. I'm Marcus, the brother with the flu who missed out on the best blind date of his life. He extended his hand, smile practiced and perfect. Caleb's told me absolutely nothing about you, which means you must be important. Nora shook his hand politely. Nice to meet you. Sorry you were sick. Best illness I ever had, apparently. Worked out for my brother. Caleb wanted to physically remove Marcus from the bakery, but customers were waiting. He served them with half his attention, watching his brother charm Nora with the ease of someone who'd spent his life being charming. After the rush died down, Marcus cornered Caleb in the back. She's gorgeous, he said. Way out of your league. Thanks for the vote of confidence. I'm serious, man. What's she doing here? She looks like she should be dating executives, not hanging out in a bakery. Maybe she likes bakeries. Marcus gave him a look that was part pity, part concern. Caleb, come on. Be realistic. How long do you think this lasts? She's got a career, a life. You're buried in flour and debt with a kid to raise. The math doesn't work. The math is none of your business. I'm your brother. Your happiness is my business. And I don't want to see you get hurt when she realizes this was just a novelty, a break from her real life. The words stung because they echoed Caleb's own fears. Before he could respond, Emma appeared, climbing onto a stool. Uncle Marcus, are you staying for lunch? Can't, kiddo. Got plans, but it was good to see you. Marcus ruffled her hair, then looked at Caleb meaningfully. Think about what I said. After he left, Caleb found Nora back at her usual table, staring at her laptop without really seeing it. You okay? He asked. Your brother's charming. He's a lot of things. He doesn't think we make sense together. Caleb sat down heavily. He said that to you? He didn't have to. I could see it in the way he looked at me, then looked around this place, like he was trying to solve an equation that didn't add up. Marcus is an idiot. Maybe, or maybe he's just saying what everyone's thinking. Nora, my team lead asked me today if I was planning to quit, she interrupted. Just asked outright. Said my performance has been slipping. I'm not as engaged. I'm clearly distracted by something. Caleb's stomach sank. What did you say? I said no, because that's the logical answer. You don't quit a six-figure job because you like spending time at a bakery. She looked at him, eyes troubled. But the truth is, I've been thinking about it a lot. Don't quit your job for me. I'm not. I'm thinking about quitting for myself, because I'm tired of performing success instead of living it. But everyone in my life thinks I'm crazy. My sister called last night, said I sound different, asked if I was having some kind of crisis. Are you? Maybe. I don't know. Is it a crisis to want your life to mean something beyond metrics and quarterly reviews? Caleb reached across the table, taking her hand. You don't have to decide anything right now. But I do, don't I? Because this in-between space, working full-time while spending all my free time here, it's not sustainable. Something has to give. So what do you want to do? Nora was quiet for a long time, watching the street outside, the ordinary flow of people living ordinary lives. I want to be here, she said finally, with you and Emma, building something real. But I'm terrified of giving up everything I've worked for and having it be a mistake, of you realizing in 6 months that I'm too much, too needy, too... Stop. Caleb moved around the table, pulling her up to face him. You are not too much. You are not a mistake. And if you're going to make life decisions, make them because they're right for you, not because you're afraid of what other people think. That's easy to say. It's the hardest thing in the world to do. I know. I do it every day. Choose this life, this business, even when everyone thinks I should do something more practical, more profitable. But it's mine, and it's real. And that matters more than impressive. Nora leaned her forehead against his chest, and Caleb held her, feeling the weight of her uncertainty, the pressure building from all sides. I don't know how to do this, she whispered. Neither do I. But we're doing it anyway. They stood like that until Emma called from upstairs, needing help with something, and real life reasserted itself. But the conversation lingered, unresolved, a storm gathering on the horizon. The breaking point came 2 weeks later. Nora had been quiet all week, distracted and tense. Work was demanding a major project, something that would require her full attention for the next quarter. Her manager had made it clear. This was her chance to prove she was still committed, still the rising star they'd hired. It's a good opportunity, Nora told Caleb on Friday night. They were in his apartment, Emma asleep, the city lights blinking beyond the window. Career-defining, actually. If I pull this off, I'm looking at a promotion, maybe even a VP track. That's amazing, Caleb said, meaning it, but hearing the hollowness in his own voice. It also means I won't be able to be here. At the bakery, I mean. Not like I have been. Maybe weekends, if I'm lucky, but the next 3 months are going to be brutal. Caleb nodded, understanding and hating it simultaneously. I told my manager I needed to think about it, Nora continued. And she looked at me like I'd grown a second head. Because who turns down an opportunity like this? Who hesitates? Someone who's reconsidering what they want. But what if what I want is stupid? What if I'm throwing away my career for something that might not even work out? Is that what you think this is? Something that might not work out? Nora turned to face him, eyes bright with unshed tears. I think I'm in love with you. With Emma. With this life you've built. And it terrifies me because I don't know how to reconcile that with everything I thought I was supposed to want. Caleb's heart hammered against his ribs. You love me? Of course I love you. How could I not? You're good and real, and you make me feel like I matter for who I am, not what I accomplish. But loving you means choosing a different path, and everyone in my life thinks I'm making a mistake. What do you think? I think I'm scared of losing my identity, of becoming financially dependent, of you realizing I'm not cut out for this simpler life and resenting me, of Emma getting hurt if this falls apart. Caleb pulled her close, feeling her shake against him. I'm scared too. Of not being enough. Of my life being too small for someone like you. Of waking up one day and finding you gone because the reality couldn't live up to the fantasy. So we're both terrified. Completely. But you're not telling me to take the promotion. Because that's not my decision. It's yours. And whatever you choose, I'll support it. Nora pulled back, searching his face. Even if I choose to keep my career? To go back to barely seeing you? Caleb wanted to lie. Wanted to say it would be fine, they'd make it work. But he'd promised himself he'd always be honest with her. I'd hate it, he admitted, but I'd understand it, because I get the pull of what you've built, the fear of losing it. I feel the same way about this place, about the life I've created for Emma. So if you need to choose your career, I won't fight you, I'll just miss you. And if I choose you, then I'll spend every day trying to make sure you never regret it. They kissed, desperate and clinging, like they could seal the decision through touch alone. But when they broke apart, the question still hung between them, unanswered. Nora left that night without committing, and Caleb lay awake listening to the rain, wondering if he'd just lost the best thing that had happened to him in years. The weekend passed in strange suspension. Nora didn't come to the bakery Saturday or Sunday. She texted, brief messages that said she was thinking, working, trying to figure things out. Caleb gave her space, though it felt like holding his breath underwater, waiting to surface. Emma noticed immediately. Where's Nora? She's busy, Firefly. Is she coming back? I don't know. Emma's face crumpled, and Caleb felt like the worst father in the world for letting his daughter get attached to someone who might leave. She promised she wouldn't forget about me, Emma said, voice small. She hasn't forgotten. She's just trying to figure some things out. Are you and Nora breaking up? The question gutted him. I hope not, baby. Me too. I love her. Caleb held his daughter, feeling the weight of consequences, the price of opening their carefully protected world to someone else. Monday morning, Caleb arrived at the bakery at 4 as usual. He went through the motions, mixing dough, shaping loaves, sliding trays into the oven. The work was meditative, familiar, but his mind was elsewhere. At 6:30, as he was pulling the first batch of croissants from the oven, the bell chimed. Nora stood in the doorway, still in yesterday's clothes, eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep. "I quit," she said. Caleb nearly dropped the tray. "What?" "I quit my job, told my manager this morning, gave my 2 weeks' notice." "Nora, let me finish." She crossed the bakery, her movements urgent. "I spent the entire weekend making lists, pros and cons, logical arguments for both sides, projections and scenarios and what-ifs, and you know what I realized?" Caleb shook his head, unable to speak. "Every scenario where I took the promotion, every single one, felt empty. Successful on paper, but hollow in reality. And every scenario where I chose this, chose you, chose building something real instead of just impressive, those felt like coming home. This is a huge decision. I know. You could regret it. I could. Or I could regret spending the rest of my life climbing a ladder I don't even want to be on." She took his hands, flour dusting her fingers. "I'm not doing this blindly. I have savings. I can freelance. I've already started looking into consulting work that would give me flexibility. This isn't some romantic impulse. It's a calculated risk based on what actually makes me happy." "And what makes you happy?" "This. You, Emma. Helping with homework and eating burnt croissants and being part of something that matters beyond profit margins. I want to wake up and know my day has purpose beyond metrics. I want to build a life instead of a resume." Caleb felt tears burning behind his eyes. "I can't promise you success. This bakery barely breaks even. I'm drowning in debt. Emma needs new shoes every 3 months because she keeps growing. There's no guarantee this works out." "I don't need guarantees. I need real. And this is the realest thing I've felt in years." "What about your identity? Your independence?" "My identity isn't my job title, and independence isn't the same as isolation." Nora smiled, watery but certain. "I spent so long being the successful daughter, the star employee, the woman who had it all figured out, and I was miserable. Here, with you, I can just be Nora. Messy, uncertain, choosing love over logic, Nora. And that feels like freedom." Caleb pulled her into his arms, holding tight, breathing in the scent of her shampoo mixed with coffee and exhaustion. "Are you sure?" he whispered into her hair. Terrified, but sure. They stood like that in the pre-dawn bakery, flour-dusted and trembling, while the ovens hummed and the bread rose and the city woke up around them. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't guaranteed, but it was real. And for both of them, that was finally enough. The first week after Nora quit felt like learning to breathe underwater. She worked her notice period remotely from the bakery, headphones on, typing furiously while fielding passive-aggressive emails from colleagues who couldn't understand her decision. Caleb watched her navigate the transition with a mixture of admiration and guilt, wondering if she'd wake up one morning and realize what she'd given up. "Stop looking at me like that," Nora said, without glancing up from her laptop. "Like what?" "Like you're waiting for me to change my mind." Caleb wiped down the espresso machine, caught. "I'm not. You are. I can feel it." She finally looked at him, her expression soft but firm. "I'm not going to wake up and regret this, Caleb. Stop waiting for me to. Your manager sent you 3 emails yesterday trying to get you to reconsider. And I deleted all 3 without responding. I'm done with that life. But what if... No." Nora closed her laptop with a decisive click. "We're not doing this. I made my choice. I'm here, fully committed. The only person who keeps questioning it is you." The truth of that settled uncomfortably. Caleb had spent so long protecting himself and Emma from disappointment that he couldn't quite believe happiness when it showed up. He kept looking for cracks, waiting for the inevitable collapse. "I'm sorry," he said. "I just want to make sure you're sure." "I'm sure. Now come here." He did. She pulled him down for a kiss that tasted like coffee and certainty, and some of the tension in his chest loosened. Emma's reaction to Nora's decision was less complicated. When they told her that evening over dinner, spaghetti that Emma had helped make, sauce splattered across the kitchen counter, the 7-year-old had simply asked, "Does this mean Nora's staying forever?" Nora and Caleb exchanged glances. "It means I'm not going anywhere," Nora said carefully. "Good." Emma returned to twirling pasta around her fork. Because I told my friend Mia that I have a Nora now, and she was jealous. You have a Nora? Nora repeated, smiling. Yeah, like how some kids have aunts or big sisters. I have a Nora. Caleb watched his daughter's easy acceptance, the way she'd simply made room in her life for this person who mattered. He wished he could be that uncomplicated about it. Later, after Emma was asleep, Nora brought up the elephant in the room. We should probably talk about logistics, she said. They were washing dishes together, the domesticity of it still strange and wonderful. Where I'm living, how we're doing this. Caleb handed her a plate to dry. What do you want? I want to be here, with you and Emma. But I don't want to rush anything or make you uncomfortable. You've been staying over 3 nights a week already. That's different from moving in. Caleb was quiet, considering. His apartment was small, barely enough room for him and Emma, let alone another person. But the thought of Nora going back to her sterile downtown apartment every night felt wrong. My lease is up in 2 months, Nora continued. I was thinking of looking for something nearby, close enough to be present, but giving us both space. Or, Caleb said slowly, we could look for a bigger place together. Nora's hand stilled on the dish towel. Together? If you want. Nothing huge. We can't afford huge. But something with 3 bedrooms, an actual kitchen, maybe a yard for Emma. He was rambling now, nervous. I mean, if that's too fast, we can... It's not too fast. Nora set down the plate, turning to face him fully. Are you sure? That's a big step. I'm terrified, but I'm sure. Caleb took her hand, wet and soapy. You quit your job to be here. The least I can do is make room for you. Real room, not just a drawer in my dresser and a toothbrush in the bathroom. I love you, Nora said, the words coming easier now, more natural. I love you too. They kissed over the sink, dish soap and all, and Caleb felt something shift, commitment becoming concrete, possibility transforming into plans. Finding an apartment in Seattle that met their needs and budget proved harder than anticipated. Everything was either too expensive, too small, or in neighborhoods that would add an hour to Emma's school commute. They spent Nora's first official week of unemployment touring depressing listings, each one confirming what Caleb already suspected. The city was pricing out people like them. This is impossible, Nora said after viewing a 2-bedroom basement apartment that smelled like mildew and crushed dreams. How do people afford to live here? They don't. They commute from the suburbs or cram 4 people into a studio. There has to be something. But after 3 weeks of searching, they'd found nothing viable. Nora's savings were healthy but not infinite, and combining her resources with Caleb's minimal ones still left them short of anything decent. The pressure was beginning to show, Nora growing quieter, Caleb's jaw tight with stress they couldn't quite acknowledge. Then Marcus called. I heard you're looking for a place, he said without preamble. Caleb shifted the phone to his other ear, suspicious. How did you hear that? Mom, she's worried about you, about this whole situation with Nora. Of course she is. Look, I'm not calling to lecture. I'm calling because I have a property. A rental I've been sitting on. 3-bedroom house in Greenwood near Emma's school. Previous tenant just moved out. Caleb's stomach tightened. Marcus, I can't afford... Let me finish. The place needs work. Cosmetic stuff mostly. Paint, some minor repairs, updating fixtures. If you're willing to do the labor, I'll give you a break on rent. Below market rate. Why would you do that? There was a pause. Because you're my brother. And because maybe I was wrong about Nora. Anyone who quits a 6-figure job to be with you is either insane or serious. I'm betting on serious. Caleb felt his throat tighten. I don't know what to say. Say you'll look at it. Tomorrow, noon. I'll text you the address. The house was a 1920s bungalow with good bones and terrible wallpaper. The kitchen was dated, the bathroom needed reglazing, and someone had painted the living room an aggressive shade of yellow. But it had 3 real bedrooms, hardwood floors under the ugly carpet, and a small backyard with an apple tree. Emma ran through the room shrieking with delight. This one's mine. No, this one. Can I have the one with the window seat? Nora stood in the kitchen, running her hand along the old tile countertops. This has potential. It needs a lot of work, Caleb warned. I like work. I'm good with my hands. Marcus leaned against the doorframe, watching them. So, what do you think? Caleb looked at Emma dancing in the living room, at Nora mentally redesigning the kitchen, at the house that could be theirs if he could swallow his pride long enough to accept help. What's the catch? He asked his brother. No catch. Just family helping family. Marcus's expression was unusually sincere. I judged too quickly, both of you. But watching you together, seeing how Emma is with Nora, I get it now. So take the house. Pay what you can afford. Make it yours. Marcus, don't make it weird. Just say thank you and sign the lease. So Caleb did. They moved in 3 weeks later with borrowed trucks and friends Caleb had called in favors from. Jamie from the bakery helped. Mrs. Chen somehow organized half the neighborhood to bring food. Marco and the construction crew carried furniture like it weighed nothing, teasing Caleb mercilessly about finally having a woman who could handle him. Nora's sister drove up from Portland, skeptical and protective, but softened when she saw the way Nora moved through the house with purpose and joy. By the end of the weekend, she was helping paint Emma's room a soft purple that Emma had chosen with intense deliberation. You're sure about this? Nora's sister Claire asked during a break. They stood in the backyard watching Caleb teach Emma how to climb the apple tree. More sure than I've been about anything, Nora replied. You gave up a lot. I gave up things I didn't want for things I do. That's not sacrifice. That's choice. Claire was quiet for a moment. He better treat you right. He does, every day. Inside the house, Caleb was having a similar conversation with Marcus. You know what you're doing? Marcus asked, handing Caleb a beer. Not even a little bit, but you're doing it anyway. Yeah. That's either brave or stupid. Probably both. Caleb took a long drink. Thanks for this. For the house. For not being a complete ass about Nora. I reserve the right to be an ass if she breaks your heart. Fair enough? They clinked bottles, and something passed between them. An understanding, an acknowledgement that family was complicated but showed up anyway. The first night in the new house, after everyone had left and the boxes were still stacked in corners, the three of them sat on the living room floor eating pizza straight from the box. Emma was exhausted but happy, leaning against Nora while Caleb told stories about the bakery's early days. Tell the one about the bread that exploded, Emma demanded. You've heard that one 100 times. I want Nora to hear it. So Caleb told the story, how he'd misread a recipe in the first month, added too much yeast, and had loaves expand so violently they broke the oven door. How he'd spent 3 hours cleaning dough off the ceiling, crying and laughing in equal measure, wondering what he'd gotten himself into. I almost quit that day, he admitted. Called my dad, told him I'd made a mistake, that I should get a real job. What did he say? Nora asked. He said mistakes are just expensive lessons, and that the only real failure is giving up before you've learned anything. Smart man. He was. Caleb looked around the house, half unpacked, chaotic, full of possibility. He would have liked you. Yeah? Yeah. He always said the best partner is someone who sees your potential and your problems in equal measure and chooses you anyway. Nora's eyes went bright. Emma, oblivious to the emotional weight, grabbed another slice of pizza. I'm glad we live here now, she announced. It feels like home. It does, Nora agreed, looking at Caleb. And for the first time in years, Caleb felt it too. Not just the weight of responsibility, but the lightness of shared burden. Not just survival, but the possibility of joy. The honeymoon period lasted approximately 2 weeks. Then reality set in with the force of a freight train. The house, charming in theory, revealed problems faster than they could fix them. The toilet in the main bathroom started running constantly. The furnace made alarming noises. Something in the walls might have been mice or might have been ghosts. Neither option was comforting. Caleb's hours at the bakery didn't magically decrease because they'd moved. If anything, they intensified. The industrial mixer finally died, requiring an emergency replacement that decimated his savings. A bad batch of flour meant throwing out an entire day's production. The rent on the bakery space increased, and his landlord was making noises about not renewing the lease. Nora, meanwhile, was discovering that freelance consulting wasn't as straightforward as she'd hoped. Clients were hard to find. The ones she did find wanted her expertise at discount rates. Her savings were draining faster than she'd projected, and the reality of financial instability was hitting hard. They started arguing about small things: dishes left in the sink, Emma's homework that neither of them had checked, the way Caleb worked 70-hour weeks and still came home stressed, the way Nora would disappear into her laptop, chasing leads that went nowhere, emerging frustrated and withdrawn. "I thought you wanted to be here," Caleb said one night after a particularly tense dinner. "I do want to be here." "Then why do you look miserable half the time?" "Because I'm stressed about money. Because I'm trying to build a business from scratch while learning to live with another human. Because this is harder than I thought it would be, and I'm scared I made a mistake." The words hung between them, sharp and honest. "Do you think you made a mistake?" Caleb asked quietly. Nora looked at him, really looked, her expression raw. "No, but I think I underestimated how hard the adjustment would be. I went from structured 9 to 5 to complete chaos. From financial security to wondering if I can pay my half of the bills. From independence to compromise. And I love you, I love Emma, I love this life we're building, but I'm also terrified and exhausted and feeling like I'm failing at everything." Caleb crossed the kitchen, pulling her into his arms. "You're not failing. I'm not succeeding either. You're adjusting. There's a difference." Nora buried her face in his chest. "What if I can't do this? What if I'm not cut out for this kind of uncertainty?" "Then we figure it out together. That's what partnership means." But privately, Caleb was asking himself the same questions. What if this didn't work? What if the financial pressure became too much? What if Nora woke up one day and realized she'd traded stability for struggle and decided it wasn't worth it? Emma, sensitive to tension in the way children are, started acting out. Small rebellions, refusing to do homework, talking back, tears over nothing. One night, she crawled into bed between Caleb and Nora, something she hadn't done in months. "Are you and Nora going to break up?" she asked in the darkness. "No, Firefly," Caleb said. "Why would you think that?" "Because you fight now. You didn't used to fight." Nora reached across Emma, finding Caleb's hand. "Adults who love each other sometimes argue. It doesn't mean we're breaking up. It means we're figuring things out." "Mom used to fight with you," Emma said to Caleb, and then she left. The room went very quiet. Caleb rarely talked about Emma's mother. Sarah had been young, scared, unprepared for motherhood. She'd left when Emma was 2, signed away her parental rights, and disappeared into a life that didn't include them. It was a wound Caleb had learned to live with but never fully healed. "Nora's not your mom," he said carefully, "and this situation is completely different. But what if she leaves anyway?" "I'm not leaving," Nora said firmly. She shifted to look at Emma, the 7-year-old's face barely visible in the dim light. "I know it's scary when adults argue, but I promise you, I'm not going anywhere. Your dad and I are working through some hard stuff, but we're working through it together. Do you understand?" Emma nodded, not entirely convinced, but wanting to believe. After she fell asleep between them, Caleb and Nora lay awake, staring at the ceiling. "We're messing this up," Caleb whispered. "We're learning," Nora corrected. "And we're doing it in front of a child who's watching our every move, which is terrifying, but also maybe the most honest thing we can do. I don't want to hurt her. Neither do I. Which is why we need to figure out how to fight better, communicate better, be better." "How?" "I don't know. Therapy, maybe?" Caleb turned his head to look at her. "You'd do therapy?" "I'd do anything to make this work. Wouldn't you?" "Yeah. Yeah, I would." So they started therapy. A couples counselor named Dr. Martinez, who worked out of a small office near the university and charged on a sliding scale they could almost afford. The first session was awkward, both of them defensive and scared. But Dr. Martinez was patient, asking questions that made them examine assumptions they'd been carrying. "Nora, you said you feel like you're failing. What does success look like for you?" Nora considered this. "I don't know anymore. It used to be clear, promotions, salary increases, titles, but now, maybe it's just being present, being useful, contributing in ways that matter. And do you feel like you're doing that?" "Sometimes. But I also feel like I'm a financial burden. Like I gave up my earning potential and now Caleb has to carry more weight. Caleb, is that how you see it? No, I see her helping with Emma, bringing ideas to the bakery, making our house feel like a home. That's valuable. That's success. But you're stressed about money, Dr. Martinez observed. I'm always stressed about money. That's not new. But it's intensified now that you're supporting 3 people instead of 2. Caleb couldn't deny that. They worked through it slowly, learning to voice fears instead of letting them fester. Learning that Nora's need for structure didn't mean she wanted to control everything, and Caleb's independence didn't mean he didn't need support. You're both trying to prove something, Dr. Martinez said during their 4th session. Nora, you're trying to prove you made the right choice. Caleb, you're trying to prove you're worth the sacrifice. But you don't have to prove anything. You just have to show up honestly. The insight landed like a key turning in a lock. After that session, they walked to a coffee shop, sitting outside in the spring rain under an awning. I have been trying to prove something, Nora admitted, that I'm not some flighty woman who made an impulsive decision, that I can handle this life. And I've been trying to prove I'm enough, Caleb said, that my small life is worth you staying for. Your life isn't small, it's full. Nora's right, a voice said. They both looked up. Mrs. Chen stood there with her grocery bags, smiling at them. Sorry for eavesdropping, she continued, but I've been watching you two. The way you are with that beautiful daughter, the way you've built something from nothing. That's not small, that's everything. She walked away before they could respond, leaving them staring after her. Everyone keeps telling us this is enough, Nora said. Maybe we should start believing them. Maybe we should, Caleb agreed. Things didn't magically improve overnight. Money was still tight. The house still had problems. Emma still had moments of insecurity, but something fundamental had shifted. They stopped trying to prove themselves and started just living, messily, imperfectly, honestly. Nora landed her first real consulting client, a small startup that valued her expertise and paid fairly. It wasn't the 6-figure salary she'd left behind, but it was sustainable. She started offering workshops on product management, discovering she loved teaching more than corporate strategy. Caleb, meanwhile, took some of Nora's earlier advice and started a small catering business on the side. Nothing huge, just weekend events, private parties, corporate lunches. It brought in extra income and gave him creative outlets beyond daily bread. One Saturday morning, 2 months after moving in, Caleb woke to find Nora and Emma in the kitchen making pancakes. Terribly. Flour everywhere, eggshells in the batter, smoke from something burning. We're making breakfast, Emma announced proudly, holding up a spatula. I can see that. In our defense, Nora said, flipping a pancake that was definitely charred, we're better at eating food than making it. Caleb surveyed the disaster zone that was his kitchen and felt nothing but love. Let me help before you burn down our house. Together, they salvaged the pancakes, turned the disaster into something edible, and ate breakfast at their scratched kitchen table in the house that was slowly becoming theirs. Emma chattered about school. Nora mentioned a new client. Caleb talked about maybe expanding the bakery's hours. It was ordinary, completely ordinary, and for Caleb, who'd spent years just surviving, ordinary felt like a miracle. That evening, after Emma was asleep, Caleb and Nora stood in the backyard under the apple tree. The spring air was cool, carrying the scent of rain and new growth. I'm glad you came to that blind date, Nora said. I'm glad Marcus got the flu. Think we would have found each other anyway? I don't know. Maybe. The universe has a weird way of working things out. Nora leaned against him, solid and real. I don't regret it. Any of it. The job, the change, the chaos. Just so you know. I know, but it's good to hear. They stood there as the light faded, the city humming around them, their future uncertain but no longer frightening. They'd chosen this. The mess, the struggle, the possibility of joy. And that choice, renewed every morning, was enough. More than enough. It was everything. 6 months into living together, the house had transformed from a project into a home. The aggressive yellow walls were now a warm cream. The kitchen counters, which Nora had learned to retile through YouTube videos and sheer determination, gleamed with new subway tiles. Emma's room was a shrine to dragons and art supplies, her drawings taped to every available surface. The apple tree in the backyard had bloomed and was now heavy with small green fruit. But the real transformation was subtler, harder to photograph or point to. It lived in the rhythm of their mornings, Caleb leaving before dawn, Nora getting Emma ready for school, the three of them reuniting in the afternoon at the bakery like planets finding their orbit. It lived in the way they'd learned each other's languages, the small accommodations that didn't feel like sacrifice anymore. Nora had taken over the bakery's books, organizing the chaos of Caleb's record-keeping into something that resembled an actual system. She'd also convinced him to start an Instagram account, despite his protests that he didn't understand social media and didn't want to. "You don't have to understand it," she'd said, photographing a particularly beautiful loaf of sourdough. "You just have to let people see what you make." Within 3 months, the account had 5,000 followers. Local food bloggers started featuring Wrights. The weekend rush doubled. Caleb had to hire another part-time employee just to keep up. "I hate that you were right," he told Nora one evening, looking at the day's receipts. "Get used to it. I'm right about most things." "Most things?" "Okay, some things. Important things." They were laughing when Marcus walked in, surprising them both. It was late, nearly 8, and the bakery had been closed for an hour. "Got a minute?" Marcus asked, his usual swagger absent. "Sure," Caleb said, suddenly concerned. "What's wrong?" Marcus pulled out a chair, sitting heavily. "Nothing's wrong. Everything's actually really right, which is why I wanted to talk to you." He looked at Nora. "Both of you." They sat across from him, waiting. "I'm selling the house," Marcus said. "Your house, I mean. The one you're renting." Caleb's stomach dropped. "What? Why?" "Because I'm moving. Got a job offer in San Francisco. Good money, better opportunities. I'm leaving in 2 months." "So we have to move again?" The thought was crushing. They'd just gotten settled, just made the place theirs. "No, that's what I wanted to talk about." Marcus pulled out a folder, sliding it across the table. "I want to sell it to you. Owner financing, reasonable terms, payments you can actually afford. I talked to a lawyer, got everything drawn up. You'd own it outright in 15 years. Caleb stared at the folder like it might bite him. "Marcus, we can't afford to buy a house. Did you look at the numbers?" "I don't need to look at the numbers to know it. Look at the numbers, Caleb." Nora opened the folder, scanning the paperwork. Her eyes widened. "These payments are less than we're paying in rent." "Exactly, and they're fixed. No increases, no landlord deciding to sell out from under you. It's yours." "Why would you do this?" Caleb asked, his throat tight. Marcus was quiet for a moment, his expression unusually vulnerable. "Because I was wrong about a lot of things. About you, about Nora, about what makes a successful life. I've been chasing impressive for so long that I forgot about happy. And you too, you're happy. You built something real. I want to help you keep it. This is too much. It's family. Just say yes before I change my mind and sell it to some tech bro who'll gut it and flip it." Caleb looked at Nora, who was already nodding, tears in her eyes. He looked at the numbers that somehow, miraculously, worked. He looked at his brother, who was offering him something he'd never thought possible. "Yes," he said. "Thank you." Marcus stood, uncomfortable with emotion as always. "Good. I'll have my lawyer send over the final paperwork. You can move forward with the sale next month." He paused at the door. "You're doing good, little brother. Dad would be proud." After he left, Caleb and Nora sat in stunned silence. "We're going to own a house," Nora said finally. "We're going to own a house," Caleb repeated, testing the words. "Together. Together." They started laughing, the slightly hysterical laughter of people who couldn't quite believe their luck. Then Nora was in his arms, and they were kissing, and Caleb felt something settle in his chest that had been restless for years. Security, permanence, home. They told Emma the next morning over breakfast. "Wait, so the house is ours?" Emma asked, syrup dripping from her fork. "Like forever ours?" "Forever ours," Caleb confirmed. Emma considered this with the seriousness she brought to all important matters. "Does this mean Nora's staying forever too?" Caleb looked at Nora, who looked back at him with an expression that said everything. "Yeah, Firefly, Nora's staying forever too." "Good," Emma said, returning to her pancakes, "because I already told everyone at school she's basically my mom now." Nora's fork clattered against her plate. "You did?" "Well, not my actual mom. I know I have a mom somewhere, even though she left. But you're like my real mom, the one who's here. Is that okay? Tears were streaming down Nora's face before she could stop them. That's more than okay, sweetheart. That's the best thing anyone's ever said to me. Emma, slightly alarmed by the crying, looked to Caleb for guidance. Happy tears, he explained. Nora's happy. Oh, okay. Emma took another bite of pancake. Can I get a hamster? The sudden shift was so perfectly Emma that both adults started laughing through their tears. We'll talk about it, Caleb said, the universal parent deflection. Life continued its forward momentum. The bakery's lease came up for renewal, and this time, Caleb's landlord offered him a 5-year term with reasonable increases. Nora's consulting business grew steadily, landing her enough clients that she could be selective about who she worked with. They fell into a rhythm that felt sustainable rather than exhausting. But it wasn't perfect. It never would be. Arguments still happened about money, about parenting decisions, about whose turn it was to clean the bathroom. Caleb still worked too much. Nora still occasionally checked her old company's LinkedIn page and wondered what could have been. Emma still had moments of insecurity, testing boundaries to make sure Nora would stay. The difference was they'd learned to navigate these moments instead of letting them capsize the boat. One evening in early November, Nora came home from a client meeting to find Caleb sitting at the kitchen table with his head in his hands. Papers were spread around him, bills, receipts, invoices. What's wrong? She asked, immediately concerned. The catering business is taking off, he said, looking up. Like really taking off. I got requests for 3 corporate events next month plus 2 wedding orders. It's more than I can handle while running the bakery. That's good news, isn't it? It's terrifying news. I need to choose. Expand the catering and cut back on the bakery, or turn down the catering work and stay small. Nora sat down beside him, looking at the numbers. What do you want to do? I don't know. The bakery is what I built. It's my identity. But the catering is what's actually profitable. And if we're going to own this house, if we're going to give Emma everything she needs, if we're going to build the life we want, I need to be smart about this. Okay, so let's be smart about it. Nora pulled the papers toward her, her mind already working through scenarios. What if you kept the bakery but hired a manager to run day-to-day operations? Someone who could handle the early mornings, the production, while you focused on growth and catering? I can't afford to hire a manager. You can't afford not to. Look at these catering numbers, Caleb. One event brings in what you make in a week at the bakery. If you could do 4 events a month, that's a big if. It's a realistic if. You're good at this. People want what you make. You just need to free up time to actually make it. They spent the next 2 hours running numbers, building spreadsheets, mapping out possibilities. By the time Emma wandered in asking about dinner, they had the skeleton of a plan. We're going to need help, Caleb said. So we'll get help. Jamie's been asking about more hours, and I saw Mrs. Chen's grandson is looking for work. He just graduated from culinary school. You've been thinking about this. I'm always thinking about this. About us. About how to make our lives better, easier, more sustainable. Nora took his hand. You don't have to do everything alone anymore. That's what partnership means. Caleb pulled her close, breathing in her familiar scent. When did you get so wise? I've always been wise. You're just finally listening. They hired Jamie as assistant manager and brought on Mrs. Chen's grandson, David, to handle morning production. It was rocky at first. Caleb struggled to let go of control, to trust that other people could maintain his standards. He showed up at 4 a.m. anyway for the first 2 weeks, hovering over David until the younger man politely but firmly asked him to leave. You're making me nervous, boss. I know the recipes. I've got this. Caleb forced himself to step back, to sleep past 4 a.m. for the first time in 6 years, to focus on the catering business that was growing faster than he'd anticipated. Nora became his unofficial business partner, handling contracts and logistics while Caleb focused on the food. They made a good team, her organizational skills balancing his creative instincts. The business grew from a side hustle to something that required a commercial kitchen rental and liability insurance and all the trappings of legitimacy. We're actually doing this, Caleb said one night after finishing a successful event for 200 people. We're actually doing this, Nora confirmed, helping him pack up equipment. I'm terrified. Good. Fear means you care. By December, the transformation was complete. The bakery ran smoothly under Jamie's management. The catering business was booked through the new year. The house was officially theirs. Papers signed, first mortgage payment made. Emma was thriving in school, her confidence growing daily. And Caleb and Nora had found their rhythm, the balance between independence and partnership that had seemed impossible a year ago. On Christmas Eve, they hosted dinner at their house for the first time. Marcus flew in from San Francisco. Nora's sister Claire drove up with her husband and kids. Mrs. Chen came with her grandson David, Jamie and his girlfriend, the construction crew. Even Caleb's mother made the trip, her initial skepticism about Nora long since transformed into genuine affection. The house was chaos, children running everywhere, adults crowded in the small living room, the kitchen overflowing with food. Emma was in her element, showing her cousins her dragon collection and bossing everyone around with the authority of a benevolent dictator. Caleb stood in the doorway between the kitchen and living room, watching Nora laugh at something Claire said, watching Emma drag David over to show him her latest drawing, watching his mother help set the table with a contentment he'd never seen in her before. This was what he'd been afraid of a year ago, opening his carefully controlled life to the possibility of chaos, of hurt, of loss. But what he'd found instead was abundance. Messy, imperfect, beautiful abundance. "You good?" Marcus asked, appearing beside him with 2 beers. "Yeah, I'm good." "You look good. Happy." "I am happy." Marcus clinked his bottle against Caleb's. "Told you she was serious." "You also told me I was making a mistake." "I was wrong. Happens occasionally." He took a long drink. "She's good for you. For Emma. This whole life you've built, it's impressive." "It's just life." "Exactly. That's what makes it impressive. You're not performing success, you're living it." After dinner, after the dishes were cleaned and the guests had gone home and Emma was finally asleep, exhausted from excitement, Caleb and Nora stood outside under the apple tree. Snow had started falling, rare for Seattle, dusting everything in white. "Thank you," Caleb said. "For what?" "For staying, for choosing this, for making our lives better just by being in them." Nora turned to face him, snowflakes catching in her hair. "You make it sound like I did you a favor, but this life we've built, it's mine too. You and Emma gave me something I didn't even know I needed, purpose beyond productivity, family beyond blood, home. I love you. I love you too." They kissed in the falling snow, the house warm and bright behind them, their daughter safe inside, their future uncertain but no longer frightening. "Do you ever think about that blind date?" Nora asked. "How differently things could have gone." "All the time. If Marcus hadn't gotten sick, if you'd been angry instead of curious, if either of us had been too scared to try. But we did try. We did." "No regrets?" Caleb looked at the house they owned, thought about the business they'd built together, pictured Emma sleeping peacefully in her dragon-decorated room. "Not a single one." The snow fell harder, blanketing the neighborhood in silence. Inside, the Christmas tree lights twinkled. Tomorrow, Emma would wake up early and demand they open presents immediately. They'd make breakfast together, probably burning something, and spend the day in pajamas doing nothing important. Caleb would probably check his phone too often, making sure the bakery was fine without him. Nora would probably field a work email or two. They'd argue about something small and laugh about something smaller. It would be ordinary and imperfect and exactly right, because that's what they'd built, not a fairy tale, but something more durable, a life constructed from honest choices and daily recommitment. A family formed not by chance, but by decision, renewed every morning when they woke up and chose each other again. Caleb thought about the man he'd been a year ago, so certain his life was too small, too broken, too complicated for love, so convinced that wanting more would only lead to disappointment. He thought about the single father standing in a cafe, about to deliver bad news to a stranger, having no idea that stranger would become everything. "What are you thinking about?" Nora asked. "Blind dates," he said, "and broken mixers and burnt croissants, all the disasters that led here." "You think we're a disaster?" "I think we're a beautiful disaster, the best kind." Nora laughed, the sound bright against the snow-muffled night. "I'll take it." They went inside, shaking snow from their coats, the warmth of the house enveloping them. Emma had left her stuffed dragon on the couch. Nora's laptop sat on the kitchen table next to Caleb's recipe notebook. Their lives, intertwined and inseparable now, evidence scattered throughout every room. Upstairs, they checked on Emma one last time, a nightly ritual neither of them would ever skip. She was sprawled across her bed, covers kicked off despite the cold, her face peaceful in sleep.
"She's gotten so big," Nora whispered. "She loves you, you know, really loves you." "I know, I love her too, so much it scares me sometimes." "Yeah, me too." They stood in the doorway, watching her breathe, feeling the weight of responsibility and the lightness of joy in equal measure. This was parenthood, the constant terror and wonder of loving someone more than yourself. And now they shared it, this beautiful burden, this magnificent gift. In their own room, they got ready for bed with the comfortable silence of people who'd learned each other's rhythms. Caleb set his alarm for 5. Old habits died hard, even if he didn't have to be at the bakery before dawn anymore. Nora plugged in her phone, already thinking about tomorrow's to-do list. "Hey," Caleb said as they climbed into bed. "Hey, yourself. When you quit your job, when you chose this, did you ever imagine it would look like this?" Nora considered the question seriously. "No. I imagined something simpler, I think, less complicated. But this is better than what I imagined. Harder, messier, more real. Better. Even with the burnt pancakes and the broken toilet and the arguments about whose turn it is to take out the trash. Especially with those things. They're proof we're actually living this, not just fantasizing about it." Caleb pulled her close, her head finding the familiar hollow of his shoulder. Outside, the snow continued falling. Inside, their home settled into nighttime quiet, the house creaking, the heat kicking on, all the small sounds of a building that was lived in and loved. "I'm glad Marcus got the flu," Caleb said into the darkness. "Best flu ever. I'm glad you didn't walk away when I told you I wasn't your date. I'm glad you showed up to explain instead of just texting. I'm glad you kept coming back to the bakery. I'm glad you let me stay. I'm glad—" "Okay, we could do this all night," Nora interrupted, laughing. "Or we could just agree we're glad about everything and go to sleep. I'm glad you're practical. I'm glad you're sentimental." They were both laughing now, the kind of laughter that came from happiness rather than humor, the kind that meant everything and nothing, that was just the sound of two people who'd found each other against impossible odds and decided to keep choosing each other every day. Eventually, they quieted. Caleb's breathing slowed, deepened. Nora felt herself drifting, the exhaustion of a long, full day finally catching up. Just before sleep claimed her, she felt Caleb press a kiss to her forehead. "Love you," he murmured. "Love you too," she whispered back. And there, in their house, in their bed, in the life they'd built from broken pieces and blind faith, they slept. Not perfectly. Caleb would wake twice to check his phone. Nora would kick the covers off around 3 a.m. But together. Always together now. The snow fell through the night, covering their neighborhood in white. Tomorrow, Emma would wake them early, demanding hot chocolate and Christmas presents. The day would unfold in its chaotic, beautiful way. There would be laughter and probably some tears. Moments of frustration and moments of perfect joy. But tonight, there was just this. 3 people under one roof, chosen family bound by love and daily decision, sleeping soundly while the world transformed around them. Caleb had spent years believing his life was too small for happiness, that wanting more was a luxury he couldn't afford. But he'd learned the truth that only comes from taking the risk. Love doesn't make life smaller. It makes everything bigger, richer, more vibrant, more real. He'd walked into a cafe a year ago to deliver an apology and walked out with a future he'd never dared imagine. He'd said 4 words, "I'm not your date," and somehow, miraculously, found the person who was. Not the date he was supposed to be, not the life he'd planned for, but the one he was meant to find. The best kind of disaster, the most beautiful accident, the blind date that finally opened his eyes to what love could actually be. And as morning approached and Christmas dawned over their small house in Seattle, Caleb Wright slept peacefully for the first time in years, knowing he was exactly where he belonged. Home.